Well, hey, folks, beautiful evening here in Michigan. I tell you what, we came off of a week during Valentine's Day where, man, you needed the Valentine to keep your spirits up and moving. It was gray, it was cold, it was no fun. It was just one of those weeks where it felt good to stay inside. It felt good to put something on simmer, on low, in the kitchen and snack on that later. Um, I know my life has been a little bit topsy turvy. I haven't had a chance to get out and do a whole lot outside as of anyway last week. Um, we've just been super busy. Double sports with the boys. I got two boys in two sports. So here we are on the basketball court and the wrestling mat, being involved, being a super dad, trying to coach in both, trying to also cheer for every kid that I've got, being able to catch all those games. We've just been running back and forth between practice and school and then games and other events. We've just been all over. And I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of people tuning in right now that are saying the exact same thing and that are, yes, relating with everything that's going on right now. It is fun. Don't get me wrong. I am having fun watching my boys come out of their shell. I am stoked to see everything that they've been able to do. But at the same time, like, man, I got out yesterday. I got out a couple different times. In fact, that Sunday, I was out. Well, brother-in-laws went out disc golfing and had a great time out there. I was hoping at this course to find a couple sheds. I was throwing pretty good though, so I didn't have to venture too far off of the fairway. So I didn't get to look under too many of the pine trees that were there. But I had a great time out there doing that. Um, Came home. The dog needed to go for a run. So again, another little shed hunting session out into the woods. Covered some ground. We actually kicked up a herd of deer, and that was fun to witness and see. Just get a head count. Trying to wrangle in my pup from trying to chase them all off. That was another story. So they got to watch me act like a fool and try to get my dog uh, back to me. He did eventually. So we kept him from chasing the deer all the way across the county. But anyway, that was a great time to go out. Got back, and then we had one of the boys who wanted to go back out and search for squirrels. So we went to a different section of the woods, took along the 22, and yeah, it just ended up being a good walk. Nothing jumped out. Nothing was scurrying across the round. It was pretty windy, so I could see why most of the squirrels were inside or in their little dens at that moment. But at least we got out. At least we got to do something. And being in the sunshine, being in the fresh air, oh, it just felt so good. This week we're hitting high temps that we normally wouldn't be hitting this time of year. Here we are, late February, and I saw 62 degrees in Michigan. I know it's too good to be true, and I'm sure winter is ready to come back around the corner. We're going to get some more snow. I know it's coming, so we'll just hold on tight for when that gets here. So at least that's the start of what we've been doing, at least on the outside. Um, Today's episode, I do want to get into trying to kind of establish a little bit more of regularity because we've been so busy with kids' practices, because we've been so busy just with the family and getting from school and all the events. I did put up a few meals in the freezer as like, hey, we can get back to these. I had some chili in some freezer bags. We had I think lasagna saved up, but not near enough to withstand all of these weeks of running around. So we've been depleted. We've resorted, I hate to say it, to like fast food. Oh, it's killing me. We grab a bite to eat at McDonald's, or we shoot, we pass by the Culvers, and so we get the kids a bite to eat at Culvers, and then we get on to the next thing. We're just surviving at that moment. And I tell you what, it pains me more than anything else to have to drive in, order my food that's, who knows where it's been domestically packaged, who knows what the processes is that it's gone through, and you just put it down. You're like, let me just like close my eyes for a few moments as I suck down these fries full of salt, full of oil, and then turn around and same thing, shove that burger down my throat and just be like, you know what, forget it, things will get better at some point. Well, hey, I've declared it. I'm saying, hey, I'm done with that. I'm done with ordering out for lunch. I know last week, shoot, I ordered from Jimmy John's. And now, hey, this is not me hating on Culver's or McDonald's. They got their place. And Jimmy John's, you know what? You make a dang good sandwich. However, I'm sad to say that I think I had multiple orders from Jimmy John's last week, just trying to have something for lunch. And it did. It just got to the point where I was like, listen, I need something homemade. I need something fresh that I've put together. I need to get off this ordering train, out of this eating out business. So that's why we've been able to bring it on in. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode. Before we do get into that, you are possibly listening to this. Many of you might even be watching this. So I'm now posting all of my episodes on YouTube. So if you are on YouTube, thanks for joining in. Thanks for watching along with. We're hoping to spice this up a little bit. I mean, I got two deer heads behind me, and that's it. We need a background. We need to jump up. I guess if we're going to push it out, we need to get some sort of professional look. We will get there eventually. We're going to step up our game. But while we're here, hey, ignite that like button. Go ahead and give it a click, change its color. That way you know that you enjoyed what you've been watching, and I get a glimpse of what you want. Hey, take that subscribe button and cut it on a cross cut. That way you're getting those real tender cuts off that subscribe button. So yeah, that way you get to see more of what I'm doing each and every bi-weekly time that we're here. So that way you are upfront. And I think there's a bell notification. Hit that bell. That'll help out as well. That'll push it forward for you. But yeah, if you're not on that platform, you're still on the old platform of podcasting. That's going to continue. This is going to be the tried and true. If you would sharpen me up with some of those 5-star ratings, that would help. I think the ones that I have, I love them and they are endearing. However, let's get a few more of them in here. I think I'm still doing some quality work. And season me up with just a bit of those reviews. Tell folks why you like to tune in. Tell folks what makes the Huntavore the stop for when you want to do something with your wild game. So anyway, those couple things I am going to ask of you. And yeah, we can finally get into our episode here of Cold Cuts. I think I did some sort of episode about sandwich making in the past, but I still feel like it's a good one to highlight. It's a good one to bring up because, again, if you go to the deli and you're picking up shaved turkey, have you looked at the price? If you've gotten roast beef, I definitely know you have seen the sticker shock from that. You get any sort of quality, you pick up a boar's head, and you get a pound of shaved roast beef, yeah, you're looking at a buco bucks. You're almost reaching $20 right now for a pound. I'm sure it's right around that $17, $18 mark if you could find it semi-cheap. Meat is becoming a commodity. Meat is becoming one of those that if you don't have your hands in the involvement of procuring it and cooking it and being able to slice it up, you're going to pay a pretty penny. It is quite expensive. But at the same time, we've talked a lot about, what quality comes from you being able to put the quality into it. We already tout about how awesome venison is. We already raise up the turkey, the wild bird that we're going to be going after here in the next upcoming weeks. I know here in Michigan, people are getting real excited about it. You got like a month or so. I'm not exactly sure when opening is. It might even be May. But anyway, it's coming up quicker than what you think. At the same time, I think I've got a second opportunity here at some wild hog. So picking up the trifecta, getting some ham put together and procured for some cold cut sandwiches here that we're going to be making up. So those are those three things that we're going to touch on today. We'll get into even how to take that roast. We're going to talk about the roasting, but then even when we get into the slicing, does it really matter? You know, is thickness really something you want to tout about? Is that something you really want to dive into and really hone in on yourself? I personally say absolutely, but we'll get into the reasons why or why not. But anyway, yeah, we're on to some sandwich making. Another reason why I think I'm all up on sandwiches right now is my wife has really gotten good at the sourdough baking. We got, or well, I don't want to say we procured, we were gifted a sourdough starter from a friend. In fact, I brought it home this past summer, and so she's had time to dabble with it. But when I brought it home, I I was at my buddy's house getting my hair cut, and as she's cutting my hair, his wife says, "Hey, do you think Elisa would like a sourdough starter? I've got a bunch of discard that I need to get rid of." And that's where your starter has already uh, fermented. It's already been able to eat up the culture, or it's eaten up the food that you've been given. So you're going to either have to feed that whole thing or discard a bunch and then remake it. So she was going to get rid of a bunch of it. And I said, you know what? I think she'd be really into that. So yeah, put some in a jar for me. So I came home with a fresh haircut, and I held up a jar of starter, and I said, "Hey babe, guess what? I brought home some sourdough starter." I didn't realize what kind of mood my wife was in at that moment. She had just got done dealing with the three boys. She felt a little overwhelmed, I think, in the state of the house and a couple other things, maybe work. I don't know, but she was just not in the mood for something else living in our house. So she held the jar, she looked at it, and she says, "Great, another thing to keep alive." Left it on the counter and walked away. And so I thought, well, you know what? Maybe sourdough isn't in our future. But I'll tell you what, sourdough has stayed. It has become a part of our family. We enjoy the sourdough. I personally have been able to make some bagels with the sourdough. That's been really fun to make. And I've also made English muffins, both of which use the discard, both of which that's one way I can be able to use those. That product as we continue to use it. So that's been super fun. Just to look into something that you would have every day. They go quick for bagels and English muffins. I always have to make a double batch because when they're fresh, they go fast. And a family of five, shoot, there's one batch out in one morning. And then like the allure slows down after the next couple days. But man, day one of fresh bagels, day one of fresh anything, fresh loaf, it gets hammered. And so my wife has been really on point with trying to up her game when it comes to her sourdough loaf. It started out with temperatures. It started out with, well, when do I take the lid on? When do I leave the lid on the uh, Dutch oven, or when do I take it off? Playing with some of her ratios in the amounts that she puts in there, even times that she then lets it rise. So she went from at one point it was like a 15 15 15 minutes, and then it became a 15 20 15. Well, then it became like a 20 20 20, and then that was too much. So then it went 20 15 20. Like she's gone textbook on it. She's gone research on trying to make sure she pulls out the best loaf. And I tell you what, it makes sandwich time awesome. Toast in the morning, that's what it's all about. A big old slice, throw it in the toaster, and then with some apple butter or even just some fresh strawberry jam, that's where it's at. That's how you start the day. But yeah, that's enough to say that I've gotten really excited about making sandwiches lately. So now let's dive into the meat of the discussion here. We're going to be going with that trifecta that I was talking about. We're going to be talking about our venison that's going to replace our roast beef. We're going to be talking about turkey here, both dark meat and white meat. We can use both of those. And at the same time, we're going to be talking a little bit about ham and curing and getting the best that we can out of maybe that wild hog that people have not taken as much advantage of. So yeah, we're starting out with the venison. I just made some roast venison the other day solely for the purpose of making sandwiches. That was the goal. I had 2 top rounds, and by going with the top rounds, I really wanted long muscle fibers. I wanted a big hunk of meat. I really wanted to be able to get that whole side cross section. Because what I'm not doing is I don't have a deli roll, or at least where I've taken chunked meat, stuck it into a bag with a binder, cooked it in that bag, and then be able to peel that off. That then spits out those uniform slices that we get from the deli, where they're running through the slicer and they just come out the same thing, same thickness, and that same circle. We actually have a little bit of variation in what we have because it's made at home. There's always going to be a little bit of that variation. But from that, I use the top round, dry brine overnight. So I hit it with a seasoning. I've been working with some of the stuff that I got from the Kairos guys. I did an episode with them quite a while ago. I need to have them back on again. But I used one of their salt and coffee rubs that usually goes with a lot of stuff, but I really like how it works with venison in a roast scenario, or even in a steak scenario. But I use that salt and coffee mixture rub, and I hit it on all sides, both top rounds, because they were smaller. They were off a salvage deer, little button buck, but you know what? He's going to good use. So I had those 2 seasoned up on a wire rack. Those go into the oven, or excuse me, into the refrigerator for overnight. So I did it that night, stayed in there, waited till the next night before I had a chance to actually get after them. And at that point, the pan underneath is liquid. So we've got a little bit of the purge that's going on underneath. It's not blood, but it was just a bunch of the purge that was out of the meat in the pan, which is good because I did want to wick off some of the outside moisture. I did want to kind of dry out the outside and get it tacky. Mainly because what I've done is, by that dry brine, that seasoning has had a chance to work its way. It's not going to go all the way into the middle of that cut. We're looking at like 1/4 inch on this. Just getting the service, almost like a marinade would at that point. But at the same time, it's also going to be wicking off that extra moisture that's going to inevitably give us some sort of mushy texture, and we wanted to avoid that. So into that, we did that overnight. Now it comes time we're going to the oven. I put my oven on at 500 degrees. That's as high as that'll go. It's a convection oven too, so I had it on convection roast. So with that convection roast, turns a little fan on in the back, so I got now moving air that's going to be going over the top of this. And I know that with it being at 500 degrees, I'm pouring a lot of heat units onto the outside of this thing. It's not going to take long for this very, lean piece of meat to get up to temperature. So I am fully taking advantage of watching this. Probe thermometer goes into the side midsection of what that is going to be. Both those go into the oven, and then I just watch that temperature. I know there's going to be a lot of carryover, so trying to get my roast to a medium as opposed to like a medium rare. The more rarer that you get it, the more difficult it is going to be to slice thin. You're going to want some sort of backing onto it. So going with a roast venison on the medium side, that's going to be helpful for trying to make sandwiches. So I pulled that out. Oh, got it. We're back into the oven. Sorry, back into the oven with the probe in it. Probe hit 120. I pulled it out because normally I'm pulling out at like 110 for my steaks, but with my roast getting up to like 120, I know it's going to have some carryover. So I pulled it out. I thought I was going to have 10 degrees of carryover. I had 14. It took me all the way up to 134. Well, it wanted to peak up at 135, but then you could see the bell curve on the graph as it was then coming back down. And that was good. I wanted it to get somewhere in there. Could I have pulled it at 115 and then let it get up to 130? That'd probably been a smarter move. If I were to take the oven temp and back it down to 450 and done the same move up at 120, I wouldn't have near, I don't think, the carryover that I would have with even that extra 50 of degrees that was on that piece of meat. There's going to be some play in there. So yeah, 450 to 500 for, man, it's like 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes. Temperature gets to 115 or 120, pull it out, let carryover do its thing. Now, on top of that, what I learned too with confit, which is a French, French term where you're cooking within its fat. I did that a lot with small game, and I learned that not only do when you pull it out of the heat, out of the water, you want to let it come to room temperature first before you get it into the refrigerator. You want to kind of have two stages to this cool down, or at least let it finish cooling to room temp and then begin the second cooling. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow, in the confit world, that's going to allow for the oil to better absorb into the meat so that you get more of this velvety texture rather than just have all the juices outside and the meat be dry. So there is a method to the madness when it comes to letting it cool down. I applied that same thing with the roasts. Pulled them out, let them just hang out on the counter until they came down to, I don't know, 80s or something at that point, but they were already way up at the hundreds, 120, 100, well, it peaked up at 135. And as I let it came down, I let it hit right around that 80-degree mark, where it was still just a little warm to the touch. Once I got it there, I then moved it to the refrigerator to finish off the cool overnight. So overnight it went into the fridge again, and what I was left with was a nice dry outside. Because I did hit it with a second layer of the seasoning and I had some mustard that was on there as well as a binder, I did get a little bit of soupiness on there a little bit. You can still see where a little bit of the mustard hasn't melted off or gone into the meat as well. It's still sitting on the outside holding on the seasoning. But as I cut into it, I have a real good backing to be able to slice through that. It has some body, it has some texture. It holds up to being cut. It holds up to being held. It's not so loosey-goosey. Which then, as I make my slices through, I could work on getting them as thin as I possibly could. From that, I could get the product that I wanted. Slice them as, again, I'm working for 1/8 of an inch is what I'm going for. If I can even go like a 1/16 and a half, like, man, I'll try it. But, at some points, like, my blade slips off and I only get half of that really thin paper cut. But there's some technique that goes with it. There's some practice that goes along with slicing for that purpose. So we get done with the venison here. So now let's say you're not into a venison sandwich. Let's say you're not into the veni. You want to save that for roasting steaks. Well, then we can move on to turkey. Turkey season's coming up here. Or if you've got an awesome little, like, local farm that you could just pick up birds at, like, shoot, I could help you find a place. But anyway, once you get your bird down, a couple different avenues. You first have to think about, do I want dark meat or do I want white meat? What am I going to be looking at? What am I going to be going for? And just like that venison, I could brine it, dry brine it. I would season it all, and with the rub of my choice, sit it in the refrigerator overnight, pull it out, maybe hit the outside with a little bit of mustard just as, to sprinkle on some more. High heat, put in that thermometer. With poultry, you do want to get it up there to like 130, 137, I think, kills most parasites. There is an article Hank Shaw put together on how everything can really be brought up to like the 137 to 145, and it's the USDA that's really pushing for the 165 because they're trying to cover their tracks, which, I mean, that's a smart move to do. If you're not sure what you're doing with poultry, I would really take it to the 165 just to be on the safe side. But to take that to take that breast and go up to like 137 and hold that temperature for a minute and then do as I did where I pulled it out, let it rest, and then let it get to room temp, then go to the refrigerator. That's one way to do that. Again, with turkey though, playing that rare game, playing that medium game, like it's not something you want to do. So I even think taking up to like 140, 145, you might be okay when it comes to the white meat. That's going to give it that little bit of extra body where you're going to be able to slice through clean. Where if you go cross grain, yeah, you can be able to slice it. You can get it real nice and thin, and that's going to lay great on if you're making a wrap, if you're making a sandwich, whatever you're trying to do with that. That's going to be a great setup for that. On the smoke side of it, I would really like look at the dark meat for that. Maybe bone out a thigh, pull the bone out. Once you've got that thigh out, you can wrap or roll that thigh up into kind of like a deli ball at that point. Tuck it up, tie it nice and good. Season it just like we did. Hit it in the smoker. With the dark meat, you can take it a little higher. 160, 165 is not bad for that because it is going to have a little bit of that, more of that fat that's involved with being an overworked muscle, and it's going to need a little time to relax. So that's a great way to do that. But you could smoke it there. I'm a hickory sucker, so I'm going to put it on hickory smoke. You could do apple, you could do pecan, you could do shoot whatever you want to as far as wood choice goes. But by doing that smoke for a little bit longer and doing that smoke for a little bit hotter, that's going to help break down that thigh to something where you can take a bite and pull it away rather than pull out the whole slice, if you know what I'm talking about. Have you ever made a sandwich like that where it's just a little too toothy, a little too brought together, where you end up taking a bite and you pull the whole midsection out, so you have to slurp that up, and now you have two pieces of bread with mayo and mustard touching. No fun. No fun on that. So give it a little bit of an extra time with that thigh. But just like we did, you bring it up to temp, let it cool down, and then get into that fridge. Give it a little stiffness, pull it back out, slice thin, lay it on there. A smoked turkey sandwich, I tell you what, any kind of mustard. It can be seedy, it could be just plain yellow. That's a go-to right there. Just mustard and smoked turkey, and that'll get you through a lot of days. That'll get you through a lot of weeks of being able to use that. I do have a recipe for smoking your breast or your thigh, and I have that at the Sportsman's Empire blog site. It will be a little bit lower in that. I'm sure there's a search bar. If you just put in Huntavore smoked turkey, it should pop up. I'll see if I can't slide it into the show notes so that it is also there so you can quick go to it, get what you need, and move along. Actually tying in with ham as well, quick little tangent. Both of those, both the smoking of the turkey and the smoking of the ham, probably is going to include cure. Cure can come across at Instacure or Prague powder or pink salt, whatever you want to call it. Not the Himalayan pink salt. This is something completely different. This is with the nitrites or the nitrates. If you start getting into the world of cold cuts and you get into the world of sausage making and you get in the world of smoking meat, you're going to come across more and more about cure. And it's good to do your research when it comes to which one are you going to use. I believe Instacure number 1 is just nitrates, where Instacure number 2 is nitrites and nitrates. I could even be wrong on that. Don't sue me if I am. I will have to check that up or check that out just to make sure that I'm correct on that. But what I am correct on is that you don't need a whole lot of that stuff. In fact, too much of that stuff can definitely not do well for your system. But just the right amount is going to help enhance both the color, and it's going to enhance just the way that the smoke adheres, the way the seasonings take off, the way that it's going to be preserving that cut for just a little bit longer. using that cure is going to be helpful when it comes to that shelf life. As a rule, I believe it is 0.25 ounces, and this is weight per pound. So we're talking less than a teaspoon per pound of cure, or per pound of meat. Less than a teaspoon of, I think it's maybe for 5 pounds, but anyway, teaspoon per whatever the weight is, could be a pound, could be 5 pounds. Again, double check that, because I'm just a guy rambling here, dabbling with cure. I definitely read what I'm looking at as far as the instruction goes, or I just to look it up to make sure. But at the same time, you don't need a whole lot to enhance that. You don't need a whole lot to get what you're trying to get across with that product. So you can use that with the turkey. You could also use that with the ham. Ham might take a little bit longer, just because, let's say I got a wild hog. There's a couple different avenues that I could go with this. I could do it as a whole leg. I did a boneless ham where I left the leg intact, took off the shank, took out the femur, and I was then left with just the whole boneless haunch. At that point, rolled it all up, tied it all up, scored the fat. That went into the cure, which was brown sugar, salt, and Insecure number 2. And I had that in there for 7 days. And I was checking not just the surface. The surface is going to get real pink. It's going to firm up really well. But at the same time, I kind of opened up where I had rolled it up to make sure that it was deep on the inside. Because what can happen is you can cure on the outside, but then you get to the inside and all of a sudden there's this gray patch, or like this little brown patch right deep in the center. And that's where the cure has not quite gotten to yet. Good thing that you cook it and smoke the whole thing from the to the proper temperature, that it's not that big a deal. At the same time, the presentation of that little donut hole that's a little gray, that's a little brown, you don't want that. You want that beautiful pink all the way through. So really make sure that you get that fully encased. The thicker that it is, the longer it's going to take. And at the same time, you also have the route of injecting. Having a manual injector, just a giant syringe that you can pull your brine into and then shoot it down into the midsection of that ham, is going to be helpful. So that was doing a whole haunch. That's not to say that, let's say you get a pig, you've already skinned it, and you start taking apart the leg, and now you've got the individual muscle groups. You can do a top round ham. You can do a bottom round ham. It does not matter. You can take those and just have smaller cuts, more individualized cuts that, smaller smoker, you can't do a whole leg, so I'm just going to do these individual muscles. That's all going to work fine and dandy. Most of the time, too, you are taking off that fat cap anyway, just because it's not going to do well in the smoker, and it's not going to do well with the cure. Kind of gets spongy, doesn't crisp it up like the way that we want to when it's under high heat. High heat's where you're going to really want to get that crispiness, and we're going with the smoking aspect, so we're not going to get that. But yeah, being able to do that with your ham also is going to be an excellent way to be able to utilize that. And again, get it to room temperature, get it into the refrigerator. Now you've got the ability to pull it out, slice it up, and send it on its way. Taking a quick break.
He was gonna steal his spot.
Oh. Okay, so we talked about product being, just with our main 3 right there, Veni, and we talked about turkey, either using breast or even using the thigh, which, dark meat turkey is my jam. Love that stuff. And then even going to the point of curing ham, whether it's off of, self-raised pork that you got, or even off of a wild hog, which I'm hoping to get one of those again this year. Bo, down. Come here. You, down. Out. Out. Come on. So you could go any one of those directions. Coming up here on before we get into the next one, as we're talking about cold cuts, I mean, we can even get to the idea of salami. We can talk about capicola. We can talk about making a really good, like, spicy pepperoni that we lay out on a sub sandwich or we lay out on some Italian bread. And that is just going to take a little bit more handling. And that's going to use some fermenting. That's going to use some cure. There's just a lot that goes into that. But at the same time, the folks over at Dry, they have been great when it comes to taking that old world charcuterie, that old world meat processing, and bringing it to the home kitchen. They've done an awesome job because I not only are they sponsoring the show, they're doing a great job, but at the same time, they also have the know-how to take our wild game to the next. So make sure that you check out Dry at umidry.com. You can sign up for their newsletter and get 10% off. If you follow the link down in the show notes, yeah, you can go in a couple different routes. I have done some whole muscle and I have done some fermented sausage. Both of them have come out dynamite with my wild game. So yeah, really check them out. So we've talked about several different cuts, even looking into getting some of that salami pepperoni involved. I mean, that's going to be an experiment on my behalf, but at the same time, experiment on your behalf. I think you should really check that out. Just a little bit that I've done, both with my sujuk sausage. That one's more of like a little charcuterie. It's got starts out with like a little bit of nutmeg and then finishes out with this, spicy pepper on the end. Oh, that's so good. I made some salami on a bigger scale, all venison. Man, I tell you what, it's such a treat. I've got some casing still left over, so I know there's like one more round that I can do to experiment. I forget which seasoning is on deck. I think it's a German style seasoning, so I'm excited to give that a shot. But anyway, now when it comes to slicing this stuff, it is a lot about the equipment, but it is also more about practice as well. You're going to want to stay away from your fatter, thicker blades. A steak knife will work out really well, but if you've got a dedicated slicer knife, I mean, shoot, if you have a dedicated meat slicer, you're already a head and shoulders above me. I don't have one of those. I have access to one, but I don't actually have one yet. You're going to want to go something high quality with one of those. You're going to want to get something like a cast base. You don't want that blade flexing, so where you've got a fat start and then it finishes out thin, or even worse on the other side where it starts out nice and thin but it flares because now it's got resistance from the meat. You don't want that. You want consistency. So find something that can give you that sort of consistency. But if you got a slicer knife, essentially a slicer knife is a thin blade, but you've got some length to it. I've got I bet you it's a 10 to 12 inch knife, and it's a dedicated slicer. The actual end of it is rounded over, so you can't stab anything as you're making a long slice across the cutting board. But what that long blade helps you do is not increase the saw action that you would get with a knife. You want to stay away when you're slicing for a sandwich or you're slicing really thin. You want to stay away from the sawing action that you would get with a serration. What that's going to do is just going to tear muscle fibers. You're just going to be left with this crumble at the bottom. It doesn't make for a very good product. Whereas if you take one of these longer knives and by applying an even pressure as you push the knife forward and then also drawing the knife back, shoot, that was 24 inches. If it's a 12-inch knife or if it's a 10-inch knife, that's 20 continuous inches of cutting that you're able to use the full length of that blade forward and backward. The fewer strokes, the less lines or jagged edges you're going to get on that cut. So if you can cut your strokes in half, that's going to give you that nice looking presentation. That's going to give you consistency in your thickness. Eighth of an inch is something really to kind of aim for. If you can get thinner than that, even better. But I know some people, even eighth inch is tough to get to. So maybe doing 3/8 of an inch, staying just shy of a quarter inch, that can still get you a nice piece of meat, but then you're not going to be able to layer on or get those folded pieces like you really want. Single slab of quarter inch, that can give you a nice sandwich. I would say that off of a Veni roast, that's like a top round roast like I used. If it was a quarter inch thick, I would still have a worthwhile sandwich. It would be much thinner in profile because I like to get those really thin cuts, eighth of an inch thick, and then be able to take those and fold those over one another. Something about the fold action, something about layering it up just really has like an awesome presentation, but at the same time, like there's nothing better than a mound of, cold cut right in the middle of that sandwich. So I aim for that, but that's not to say there's nothing wrong. Like, shoot, let's say you're not even going the sourdough route, and you're packing a road trip, or you're off to practice, or you're off to a tournament. That's the one where you'd really do it. I got a buddy who their family would buy a loaf of bread, and it literally was they would take two pieces of bread, they would put a piece of bologna, a piece of cheese, bread, throw that in the back of the sandwich bag. And they would just rinse and repeat, and they would refill that sandwich bag now with pre-made bologna and cheese sandwiches. And that's what they would take to an all-day tournament. Mom would be up in the stands. She'd have like whatever bag or whatever all their food and munchies were in. She'd open up that and then just pull out one sandwich, two sandwich. And now as an adult, I'm like, dang, that's a great idea. That's a smart idea. So yeah, if I'm making something out of my turkey breast, I'm going to cut those quarter inch thick, and I'm going to go piece of bread, piece of turkey, maybe provolone, Havarti cheese, something a little bit different, something a little fancy. Throw on another piece of sandwich, throw that to the back of the bag. Rinse, repeat, boom, boom, boom. Line up those sandwiches. When the kid starts squawking, you just throw a sandwich at them, and man, it's ready to go. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Another thing, actually, I got this one from my sister-in-law. She started doing pinwheels, or like kid sushi, as she refers to it. And these things have taken on really well. This is our after-school snack. I have been making these just because they transport super nice, and because you can put all the sandwich material in there, and it's literally like, it's bite-sized at this point. She'll take a large tortilla, the burrito-sized tortilla, and she'll coat real thin coat of cream cheese, and she'll get the outside of it. And especially she's going to get the opposite end. So there's one end that you're going to start to roll, and she hits the edge of that opposite, and it'll make sense here in a minute. She then takes her sandwich material. Usually for her, she's using some of the turkey meat from our store, but shoot, she'll lay down 2 pieces of meat. She'll throw on some of the cheese. She puts in a layer of spinach. She's going to try and put some green in it, a little bit of a crunch. She's even put different sauces on it. She's utilized a bunch of the Chick-fil-A sauces, and she'll throw those on there as well. Just a real thin, even spread. And then starting at the one side, roll that sucker real tight. We're talking real tight on this. And when you get to the final edge, you've already hit that with the cream cheese. That's your adhesion. That's your tape. That's your stopper that you leave it on that edge a little bit, and it's going to hold the tortilla together so it doesn't come undone. She'll nip off the ends because the ends get real spotty when it comes to making a good cross cut. But then she's left with a solid roll sandwich at this point, and she will cut them 1/2 inch thick, and she'll have 6 or 7 pieces off of one tortilla. She stacks those in a Tupperware, and now when she, shoot, we're at the basketball game, she pulls it out, pops off the top, and she has these tiny little sandwiches that are just ready to go. And I mean, granted, in a sitting, I could polish off the entire little tub, but two or three of these things, and the kids were super happy. They were satisfied, and they were moving on with the rest of their day. And it was like, man, that little pinwheel, like, yeah, it's not a traditional sandwich, but at the same time, to shake things up with a roll up, that really did kind of, it brought a little bit, it was something different. Same ingredients, but a different way it was just thrown to you. I know there's some people who can't handle leftovers day after day. If I make a pot of chili, I'm gonna eat that same pot of chili 5 days in a row and just be happy as a clam. But I don't. My wife, she can't do that. So having a sandwich one day and then using those same ingredients and having a roll up the next day, that's gonna be her way to be able to continue to use our wild game. That's going to be the way that we're going to use our wild game, not just on a certain day or once a week basis, but really trying to get everyday wild game into our diet. That's the continued growth, and we're going to have ebbs and flows with that. Things are going to go our way, and then things are also going to not go our way. So by being able to kind of present it in a different way, and maybe even get a chance to play with different species here. We threw the turkey in, we threw the ham in. We've got the big three covered right here when it comes to sandwich making. So that's how I'm going to try to continue to re-add wild game into my everyday. So yeah, we got to get back on the ham making, and turkey season's coming up here soon. So I know guys are going to be really wanting to stock their freezer up with another bird. Save half for Thanksgiving and use the other half for making sandwiches. So yeah, as silly as it seems, cold cuts, sandwich making, it's that fringe, it's that easy step. You could grab a slice of bologna and just be fine. Or maybe you take a step up and roast your own roasts just for the fact of making sandwiches. If you're going to be cutting it, make sure that knife is sharp and using less strokes as you go through to get that nice clean edge. And don't be afraid to really experiment with seasonings on the outside. Trying something different, like I did with the salt and coffee rub, it really did add a pop to that sandwich meat. So, folks, whether you're going to be getting fancy with the sourdough and all the different amenities that can go on to a sandwich, or it could be even just going your straight lace white bread piece of meat with some cheese, add your wild game to it. Take it one little step higher. But if you're going to cross that, or if you're going to get that sandwich put together, and you need to either cut it on a bias or straight across, your choice is okay. But make sure that knife that you're using is very sharp.